In a deserted, dark, dilapidated building, Peter Parker is fighting with the Goblin, a villainous character who Norman, Harry's father, Peter's close friend, has transformed into using an advanced armor. With the advantage of modern equipment, Goblin launches continuous attacks and gains the upper hand against Peter. However, Peter, with his resilience and determination, turns the tide of the battle, overwhelming Goblin. And after a failed sneak attack, Goblin ultimately ends his own life. Before dying, he whispers to Peter, "Don't tell Harry." The truth behind the story and why Peter had to fight his friend's father unfolds in an intriguing sequence of events in the Spider-Man movie. Peter Parker is an orphan, raised by his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Growing up in peace, he becomes a kind-hearted and somewhat shy young man. He is often teased by others, yet Peter doesn't retaliate, silently going about his days at school. Like many other boys, he starts developing feelings for a girl, Jane, who is the object of his affection. However, his love remains unspoken, as Jane is dating the school jock. Today, the school organizes a large-scale science fair. Outside, Harry, the school's golden boy, is accompanied by his father, Norman. Harry seems uneasy about this, wanting to fit in and live like his peers. He approaches Peter, meeting Harry's father for the first time. As the group enters the laboratory, filled with thousands of spider species, Peter's gaze remains fixed on Jane, almost getting into trouble with the school jock. Peter is knowledgeable about spiders, touring and sharing information with Harry. Harry, seemingly interested in Jane as well, engages her in conversation using the knowledge Peter imparted to him, which Jane finds intriguing. Harry is then dragged away by the class president, allowing Peter to approach and ask Jane for a photo. Jane happily agrees, striking a few alluring poses. As Peter is immersed in taking photos, a spider suddenly descends onto his hand and bites him. Distracted by Jane, Peter doesn't notice, experiencing a momentary sting. Little does he know that this seemingly insignificant event marks a significant turning point in his life. The spider is a genetically modified species, part of a research project led by Norman, Harry's father. However, due to lack of conclusive human trials and feasibility concerns, the Defense Department decides to halt funding for the project, leaving Norman deeply disappointed. Back at home, Peter feels exhausted and heads to his room. Suddenly, he experiences dizziness and collapses onto his bed, unaware that his body is undergoing a complete genetic transformation. Upon awakening, Peter realizes that he has become someone else entirely. His senses become unusually heightened, and he no longer needs his glasses. Frustrated with the decision to terminate the project, Norman recklessly injects himself with the experimental vaccine he created, resulting in a manic transformation. He even kills his unfortunate assistant in a fit of madness. Furthermore, his body becomes more muscular, with bulging muscles. Looking out the window at Jane's house, Peter feels incredibly confident, striding downstairs to greet his uncle and aunt before heading to school. Lost in admiration of Jane, watching her step into a luxury car, Peter is struck by a sudden realization of the unfamiliarity of his body. Harry arrives home to find his father unconscious on the floor. He helps his father up, but before they can speak, the secretary enters and informs them that the board and armor have been stolen, and the thief callously murdered a company employee. As for Peter, he uses his agility to help Jane from falling and receives her first admiration. He also pranks the school jock, causing him to search for Peter in class. In the face of his attacks, Peter's senses are heightened, allowing him to perceive details that others can and easily outmaneuver the school jock, surprising everyone. Peter is also surprised by his newfound abilities. He rushes out of school and into an alley, horrified by the spider bite. He discovers he can shoot webs and notices spider-like hairs growing on his fingers, enhancing his wall-crawling ability to effortlessly scale walls. He playfully swings between buildings, feeling like the freest person in the world. Back at home, Peter still keeps an eye on Jane. They meet and chat outside, discussing their future plans. Peter expresses his ambition to become a professional photographer, while Jane reveals her passion for acting, hinting at a connection between them. While engrossed in conversation, Jane is urged into the car by her boyfriend. Peter follows, determined to buy a car to impress Jane. One day, Peter reads about a wrestling competition with a $3,000 prize. He decides to enter, designing his own costume and training rigorously, breaking things in his room. When Aunt May asks, He claims to be busy exercising. One day, Uncle Ben decides to talk to Peter about his recent changes, noting his lack of help around the house, his fights at school, and his temper. Uncle Ben sympathizes but warns Peter about the double-edged sword of power, urging him to be responsible. Peter reacts defiantly and leaves the car, disappointing Uncle Ben. In the ring, a muscular wrestler dominates his opponents. Peter decides to register, appearing comically small in his red spider-themed outfit. As he steps into the ring, the cage suddenly collapses, and the announcer forces Peter into a dangerous situation. The favored fighter aggressively attacks Peter, but he effortlessly dodges and counters, stunning everyone. Despite his victory, the competition organizer only pays him $100 for winning too quickly. Disappointed, Peter heads home. On the bustling streets, he encounters a crowd gathered around a car, only to find his Uncle Ben lying on the ground, fatally shot by a robber. In his final breaths, Uncle Ben imparts wise words to Peter before passing away. Determined to avenge his uncle, Peter chases down the thief, utilizing all his abilities to catch him. However, in a moment of carelessness, the thief trips and falls to his death. Returning home, Peter finds Aunt May, and they embrace in sorrow over Uncle Ben's death. Meanwhile, the defense secretary is testing an advanced combat armor when suddenly, a figure in similar armor appears and eliminates the soldiers testing the armor, causing the experiment to fail and resulting in the deaths of everyone present. Finally, Peter and his friends graduate. At the graduation ceremony, May and Norman, Harry's father, attend. Back home, Peter mourns his uncle's death, with Aunt May comforting him. Peter resolves to become a useful hero to society, beginning his mission to rid the world of evil. People rejoice and feel safer with Peter's presence, despite not knowing his true identity. One day, Peter coincidentally meets Jane on the street. She is shy around Peter about working as a waiter. Jane asks Peter not to tell Harry about their meeting. They agree to have dinner together when they have free time. Peter visits Harry, who kindly offers job recommendations, but Peter declines, opting to find a job himself. He takes action shots of himself in action and sends them to newspapers, landing a stable job. During a meeting at Oscorp, the board decides to fire Harry's father, who becomes furious and sinisterly smiles. At a merger event for Oscorp, Peter notices Jane with Harry when suddenly, a green smoke emerges, revealing a demon-like figure in strange green armor. He bombs the building, endangering Jane, but Peter quickly saves civilians by shooting webs. Peter changes into his costume and battles the green demon, using his webbing to match his speed. Despite the demon's ferocious attacks, Peter fights back while rescuing Jane, ultimately destroying his flying board and forcing him to flee. Back at home, Harry asks Jane about their relationship, but she remains silent. Harry discusses the identity of the demon with Peter, who vows to defeat him regardless. Meanwhile, at his home, Harry's father appears to suffer from the effects of the vaccine, displaying dual personalities. In the newspaper office, the green demon attacks, threatening the editor to reveal Spider-Man's whereabouts. Peter transforms and shoots webs into the editor's mouth, but he is fainted by a tranquilizer and taken away. The demon captures Peter and tries to manipulate him with promises of power. Peter refuses and leaves. Peter returns and encounters Jane, inviting her to dinner, but she declines. Peter notices some thugs following her and changes into his costume to rescue her. He fights off the thugs and saves Jane, who gratefully kisses him, unaware that he is Spider-Man. During a fire in a downtown building, a frantic woman pleads for help to save her child. Peter arrives and saves the child but hears cries for help above. He discovers the green demon impersonating him and causing the fire. The demon injures Peter's hand with a bomb and escapes. At Harry's Thanksgiving party, Harry's father pays special attention to Peter's injured hand and realizes he's Spider-Man. He storms out and later expresses strong disapproval of Harry's relationship with Jane. His condition worsens, leading to a sudden change as he attacks Aunt May. Peter, sensing danger, visits her, fearing his identity has been compromised. Jane is also there and confides in Peter about her feelings, admitting she's in love with Spider-Man. Peter gathers the courage to confess his feelings to Jane, who seems to reciprocate. However, Harry walks in on them and witnesses everything, later recounting the scene to his father. Despite being with Aunt May, Peter senses danger approaching Jane. He calls her, but the Green Goblin answers, makes a cable car explode and forcing Peter to choose between saving the children and Jane. Peter jumps to save Jane and the children, but the Green Goblin attacks him. Peter instructs Jane to climb down while he handles the situation, but he's overwhelmed by the Goblin's attacks. However, the citizens above witness the scene and pelt the Green Goblin with rocks, aiding Peter's struggle. The Goblin kidnaps Peter and takes him to an abandoned building, where he forces Peter to eat a grenade. While Peter is disoriented, the Goblin relentlessly attacks him and threatens to kill Jane. Peter, regaining his senses, fights back ferociously, unmasking the Goblin as Norman, Harry's father. In a last-ditch effort, Norman tries to impale Peter with his glider, but Peter dodges, causing Norman to impale himself. As Norman dies, he pleads with Peter not to let Harry know the truth. Peter discreetly takes Norman's body back home, but Harry witnesses everything and attacks Peter before disappearing. At Norman's funeral, Harry vows to avenge his father's death by killing Spider-Man. Jane also expresses her feelings for Peter, knowing he silently watched over and protected her. Despite Jane's heartfelt confession, Peter, knowing the danger of being with her, walks away, remembering Uncle Ben's teachings. In the final scenes, Peter, in his Spider-Man suit, swings through the skyscrapers, seemingly accepting his lonely fate and the immense responsibility he holds for the city's people. The movie ends with Peter thanking the audience for watching and inviting them to like and subscribe for future content.